Everyone, to check your settings, we would like to make sure we see everybody's name so we can know who is in the meeting. So some of you say like iPad or Demo Duo, for example. If you could change so we can see your name, we would really appreciate it. Let's see. You can change it by going into participants and finding your name. Click on yourself. And then click rename. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm just going to make a few opening remarks. Again, my name is Deb Klein. I am on the leadership team of Indivisible Lambertville-New, and welcome to our Candidates Corner, and thank you for joining. This event tonight is offered as a purely educational opportunity for Lambertville voters to hear directly from candidates running for council. Thank you to all of you who submitted questions. We had a huge number of questions that came in, way more than we can possibly cover in tonight's session, and many of them overlap. So we selected the ones that are those that we hope are going to be the most informative about the future of the city, and that should help you make a decision about your vote. I wanted to note that in particular, you'll notice that we've removed any of the questions that were about the affordable housing plan. That plan was approved by the court and adopted by the planning board as of last night, endorsed by the city council. So any discussion of affordable housing is now moot, and that gives us some more time for some of the other more pending issues. Please note that as an organization, Indivisible Lambertville-New has not and does not endorse any particular candidates running for city council. Any support of a candidate by a member of Indivisible Lambertville-New leadership team is done strictly on a personal basis. So let me tell you how this is going to work. This is going to be, there are going to be 3 20-minute sessions, one with each of the candidates or slate of candidates. The questions will be posed by an unbiased moderator. And in the interest of the neutrality, all the moderators, including myself, are not Lambertville residents. And in addition, the order of appearance of the candidates was selected by completely random draw. So again, we're very interested in trying to keep things as neutral as possible. The candidates have not had any previous access to the questions, and they will not be able to hear each other's answers. All participants, except for the moderators and candidates, will be muted. And the chat function will only be available for questions to go to the info@indivisible-lambertville-new.com. We will also be recording this session and preserving the transcripts of any chat, so for review later on. And in all fairness to you and the candidates, there will be a timekeeper, and the 20-minute time limit will be strictly enforced. Let me just check that we have David Ringer on hand. David Ringer will be our first candidate, and questions will be posed to him by Nancy Bolter of Raritan Township. Now, do we have David? Okay. Is David Ringer available? Okay. We're going to move on then to Steve Stegman and Benedetta Lambert. And then in that case, it'll be Paige Barnett from Delaware Township to ask the questions.
I think Paige is muted. Deb.
Uh,
Aha, there I am. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. As Deb said, my name is Paige Barnett. I live here in Delaware Township, and I'll be asking the questions for Steve Stegman and Benedetta Lambert. I hope I said that correctly. Steve and Benedetta, are you here? Because I can't see you.
Paige, we do have David Ringer. So if you want to hand it off to Nancy.
Okay, so I'm going to hand it back to Nancy because David is now in the chat room. He is in the room.
And I'm going to unmute Nancy as soon as I can. Nancy, where are you?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Good. There you go. Good.
Okay, I'm just looking for Mr. Ringer.
Yes. Assuming I can hear you.
There he is.
Okay. Okay. So he has 3 minutes to make an opening statement. Is that correct?
That is correct. David, go ahead. You have 3 minutes for your opening statement.
Okay. When this all started back after the first show at the Justice Center, there were a group that got together over at the Elks Club. And we all talked about what was going on with the city. And I, being an architect that's been in the construction business for over 60 years, was appalled at some of the answers I got at the presentation. And when the group gathered out at the Elks, I spoke rather forcefully, including my recommendations for how to deal with the problems at the police station, because I did the same thing for the National Guard at one point when I worked with the Corps of Engineers. And after I spoke and received applause, which is strange for me, I'm not the kind of person that typically is out in front. As a theater tech, I'll build your set, I'll run your lights, but don't put me on stage because I'm not good at that. So, and people afterwards, a couple of people said, you know, maybe you should run for council. Well, the following week, we had a gathering at Jeff Klein's in his back room where the group tried to get itself organized, decided it was going to be called Lambertville United, which I expect most people are familiar with. And at that point, I told everybody, I'm going to run for council. And Jeff Klein said, well, maybe I could run too. Well, the following week was at the big council meeting where so many people spoke. The city declined to include me in that meeting minutes because that's where I offered to do a pro bono survey of all of the city buildings. I did exactly the same thing for the entire Department of Corrections in New Jersey, hundreds of buildings in a 10-year plan, and I offered that at the council meeting. Well, it didn't make it into the minutes, and the next day I turned over to the city clerk my offer as a registered architect to do just that. Haven't heard back yet, but I said the next thing I can do, I can run for council, and I can see that my influence as someone who knows all about buildings can be brought to bear on the circumstances with consolidating the facilities and what can be done about it. In terms of the police facility, I redesigned the facilities down at the Roundhouse in Philadelphia and also at the 4 district command buildings for the Philadelphia Department
30
of Police.
seconds.
So So I have the experience, I have the background. My history here in Lambertville is in Rotary. If your child came home with third grade with a dictionary or came home from fifth grade with a thesaurus, that was those of us in the Lambertville-New Hope Rotary Club who sponsored that. We also sponsor Christmas for needy families in coordination with Fisherman's Mark. And Rotary, Service Above Self, has a motto, and that motto makes it very difficult to promote yourself.
Mr. Ringer, as a newcomer to the city council, what do you think your biggest challenges will be? And you have 1 minute for that question.
Well, I think probably the most difficult thing is going to be overturning Ordinance 03/2019. That's the ordinance that in great detail reorganized this, basically the city charter and how the government's to be run. It took what is normally done by the mayor and the city clerk and assigned it to a totally new entity that costs a lot of money. And repealing that is the first challenge.
30 seconds.
It's got to be repealed. But more importantly, my challenge is to convince the other members of council. I tend to be very persuasive, and I make good points backed on facts. And with that, I hope to be able to convince them to overturn that ordinance and restore the government to the way it was without an expensive business administrator.
In regards to the budget crisis, can you explain your understanding of the city's current financial crisis? What ideas are you bringing to the governing body to fix it and keep Lambertville affordable? 2 minutes.
Wow, you're not exactly in my bailiwick. I looked through the budget and found things that I had questions on, but without actually access to somebody who can answer those questions intelligently, I really didn't know what to make of the budget. It's many pages long, and I'm not an accountant. But the answer, quite frankly, when it comes down to it, is figuring out how to run the government efficiently. One of the big problems we saw was recently with the unemployment system is we have somebody in charge of the Department of Labor who's not a manager. And it takes a manager to run things. It takes a manager to see the plan to get from point A to point B and to monitor progress along that plan to see that you get to the end results. And looking hard at how the city is run, who's responsible.
Don't do it. Don't join the breakout rooms.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, don't do it. I'm sorry. The breakout rooms expired when they should not have. Keep talking, David.
Did we lose him?
I don't know.
Wonder.
I don't know where he is. Back in a breakout room, maybe. All right. The breakout rooms have expired, unfortunately. I'm going to try to recreate them. Let me see if I can find David.
I'd like to apologize for a little bit of the technical difficulties that we have. Appreciate your patience.
All right. Yep, David is now unmuted.
Hello?
There he is. So let's give him a second chance to answer that question.
The question about the budget?
Yes.
Okay.
Nancy, could you ask it again?
Sure. Explain your understanding of the city's current financial crisis. What ideas are you bringing to the governing body to fix it and keep Lambertville affordable?
Well, it's my understanding. It's my understanding from what the former mayor explained at the meeting at the Elks, that basically the city has long-term bonds at 2 or 3% interest that are due to be paid off within the next decade. Now, I don't know about the rest of you, but if I had such a sweet deal on my mortgage, I would be very, very pleased. 3% paid off in 10 years, that would be very nice. So I think the basic finances of the city are good, but what's happened recently with various ordinances being passed and expenses being raised to a high degree, it becomes very, very difficult to figure out what's going on. Excuse me. To figure out what's going on by reading the budget, which, as I said, is very, very extensive. And the way they're organized, unless you're familiar with accounting, it's very difficult to interpret what this fund for this is in and that fund for that is. For example, there's a $100,000 line item, 100,000 for community developed block grants related to the brewery. What's that about? Why is there a $100,000 line on the budget for the brewery? That's one of the places that everybody's been saying we can't possibly convert into any city building. And quite frankly, that would make a great place to put the police department. It's a good, solid building. It has drive-through, which is what you need for a sally port. And a sally port, for those of you who don't know, is a space where you can bring a car in, lock both doors, and take someone out of a police car without them being able to get out. It's a way to transfer somebody from the inside to from the outside.
1 minute left.
Brought in to the inside. But there are a lot of things on the budget that I read and questioned like that, and it's impossible to try to get straight answers with the city council meetings. Now that they're being held virtually, with no offense to the Zoom meeting, because in spite of technical difficulties, I feel like I'm getting across, the council meetings, there's no way to question anything like that and get any kind of straight answer. Even in person, it was difficult to get straight answers. So to understand the budget, that's something that would take honest responses from the city government. And in council, that would be one of the first things I would do, is start questioning all of these things that I don't understand what they are, why they're there, and get someone to explain to a layman. You want to build a building, I'm your ace, but you want to do your accounting, forget about it. I have terrible time with my taxes. That would need someone to be able to sit there and me say, okay, what does this mean? And explanations I understand very well. And if they don't ring true, forget about it. Because one of the things I have the ability to do is quickly scan and capture something. It made me great in the college boards because I could cram and spit
Time
it
is
all
up.
back out.
Time is up. Let's stop for a minute. We do have one of the other candidates in the room. I'd like to invite her to take herself back into the green room until it's her turn. There we go. All right. Nancy,
Okay.
you on to your next question.
Okay. Per the budget discussions, the city seems to be considering either selling some of the city facilities or undertaking renovations to improve the conditions of these facilities. Can you talk about the pros and cons to each approach and how you'll get and take into consideration opinions from the public? 2 minutes for that question.
Well, the city facilities, one by one, the police station. The police station has a variety of issues, one of which is a slab that's settling unevenly because the compaction was not done properly. And that's a fix that I've already done at another job for the National Guard. But it also has some structural problems with the walls and some uneven foundation settling. There was a geotechnical report that was released by Lambertville United today that goes into elaborate detail as to the issues with that building. It certainly is savable, but it is very, very questionable about it being able to be sold to anybody because all of those problems with what it takes. And a geotechnical engineer analyzes a site and tells you what it takes to build on it. And in this case, it was also to repair on it. That albatross is going to make that piece of land very difficult to sell. That's not to say that we should do something about the police station.
1 minute.
They shouldn't be in there either. The possibility of relocating it somewhere, absolutely. There's lots of options. The other two buildings, they're in fine shape. We have a brand new roof on both buildings. And the first thing you do when somebody's building a building or repairing a building is say, make it watertight. And both those buildings are completely watertight. The attic or third floor, actually, it's not an attic. The third floor of City Hall is completely empty, could be refitted and used. The basement of the library is also empty and could be refitted and used. And both of those buildings only require maintenance, and that's all, and not an exorbitant amount of money invested.
Okay, next question.
Okay, in regards to growth, development, and redevelopment, how would you balance Lambertville's need for growth and revenue with maintaining its historic feel? And 2 minutes for that answer.
Well, one of the things that the city code has, the building code, and now you're in my ballpark, that the city code has, is a fully developed publication about the building types in Lambertville, their historic significance, and the requirement that any new construction conform to that. That's something that sometimes yes, sometimes no, you actually get conformance to. But I would stress that that needs to be done. You need to make sure that people don't get exceptions to the building code to build things that are not appropriate. That was the issue with the building that was to be built on the auto store lot. And I miss the auto store. I used to be able to walk and get parts. Now I got to drive. But the proposal there had too much density, not enough parking, and was asking for variances to ordinances. And believe me, if I'm on city council, you better have a good reason for a variance for an ordinance. Did you say I'm done?
1 minute.
1 minute, okay. The development in the city has areas that need to be handled as if you own gold. This town only has so much space between the mountain and the river, and there is no extra space to build on. So if something's going to be built, you want to make sure you get something worthwhile for it, and the gold is seek from the person who wants to get it for development. And the current discussion using payment in lieu of taxes, known as pilot, is absolutely ridiculous because one of the problems in Philadelphia is the city tax base has been devastated by all the tax breaks that have given to all the developers in Philadelphia, which has cut the tax base of Philadelphia significantly with the new buildings downtown. So you need to say, I have something of value. Let's talk.
In your opinion, when would new development in Lambertville become overdevelopment? 1 minute.
Oh, as soon as you have not enough parking for the number of residents in the space, you're instantly overdeveloping. There's only a handful. One of the things that is on my list to do for my review of facilities for the city pro bono is I have a note here that I need to go through. Here it is. The auto store, the CVS lot, the brewery, and the YMCA lot as a place to relocate the police station. And I believe they have enough space. It doesn't seem to be particularly well oriented, being crammed into a rectangular building. But that's exactly what I did for the city of Philadelphia, for the main headquarters and all 4 district stations. So that's something I'm familiar with. And the process of figuring out how to solve those problems and only have development where you really need development, and not give up something like the YMAC lot to a developer when it could be perfect for the police station.
Okay. In regards to civil rights, How do you feel about police accountability? What police reforms would you advocate? For example, body cameras or a review board for civilian complaints. 1 minute.
Oh, this is something I already answered at one point because this has been under tremendous amount of discussion in a web group called the Mensa Firehouse. The picture at the front is a squirrel holding a hose spraying fire. And believe me, it's a wild, wild sight with all the rest of us Mensans. The point I made very simply is, the answer is cops that are too aggressive, that are the bullies in high school, that enjoy using power. And in my career running teams of 60 or 70 people, I'm familiar with power. And it's best used gently, and it's best used encouragingly. And there are people that don't use it that way that are cops. And that power problem needs to be weeded out so that the good cops, such as the ones we have here in town, get to really shine. The answer is a civilian review board, but not just a civilian review board. A civilian review board with the same power as a grand jury.
Time.
What, if any, systemic changes would you make to combat racism? 1 minute.
Oh, the difficulty is that we don't necessarily have it, at least as much as I'm aware, in this town. I think this town is a very loving town that includes everybody with equal arms. The number of signs, hate has no home here, are all over the town. And I know that my three daughters, Amanda, Patricia, and Charlotte, when they went to school up at South, they were completely colorblind, and so were their classmates. So I don't know what we can do here in Lambertville. I really supported what the kids from the school. I think it's important that solidarity is presented. But I don't know what I'd change here in town. I think we have a great police force.
Okay. In closing, what do you see as the single most pressing issue that the council will need to address in 2021?
The single most
pressing issue.
Oh, absolutely. Trying to undo the harm that's been done to our budget. Trying to figure out how to cut all this expense on professionals and pass ordinances that limit professional bids to 3 bids, not just give it to the person who just happens to be where the city planner works. The whole conflict of interest thing, that's something that I think would need an ordinance under itself. There's a group called Represent Us that is working on a local level all over the country to pass ordinances that have to do with not cheating, with no fraud in government, with no conflict of interest in government, and tight laws in terms of what we all should have morally in terms of what guides us. Don't do something that serves yourself. I mean, I've been in Rotary 42 years, and Rotary's motto is service above self. And that is something I've lived my life by, the idea that you should be serving because you want to help someone else, not because you want to feather your nest. So that would be a real challenge for city council to see that they pass such an ordinance and see that we never again have any potential conflict of interest in the city. Because we're currently fighting a lawsuit about Dave Del Vecchio and the property on the hill because he was working for a construction company in marketing. And that's something that could be cited as a conflict of interest. I don't know that there was any, but certainly that is the appearance of impropriety, which is all you need for a conflict of interest to have the public give up on you.
There are residents who have found this primary divisive. Regardless of whether you agree and regardless of whether you win, what will you commit to doing to ensure a civil and respectful culture going forward?
Well, my offer for the buildings, my assistance for anything that is needed by city council certainly won't go away. My experience in the construction industry really comes to the fore on this. Building the $100 million courthouse in Philadelphia, I'd go into a construction meeting with the construction foreman for the construction manager. Amazing guy. Shirts pressed. His blue jeans had a crease in them. He was absolutely the gentleman. But boy, when we were in the meeting and he wanted to argue, he would stand up and he would curse a blue streak and be very, very forceful. And I learned that the same thing needs to be done to counter that kind of opponent. But at the same time, we'd finish the meeting and it'd be, hey, let's go out and have lunch together. And we talk about the Phillies or the Eagles, and we didn't carry the war with us beyond where we had a legitimate war. And this election is absolutely the same way. It's not going to make me who I am any more or less whether I win or lose. I'm doing it because I care about the city. I think I have a lot to offer, and I think I can make the circumstances better. One of the things I'm really upset is lockstep voting, which we currently have from the candidates. And if you put Stegman and Lambert in, you're going to have lockstep voting too. She said that she was not opposed to consolidation of city services at the meeting. Now, hey, all of a sudden she is, because now she's Steve's partner. I guarantee you, if both of them get elected to council, every single vote they vote on, they'll vote exactly the same way. And I bring an independent voice that may have a different view and can be persuasive on council to see that we end up getting the best solution.
Thank you, David and Nancy. Now we're going to bring in our second slate of candidates, and that will be Steve Stegman and Benedetta Lambert. And the questions will be posed by Paige Barnett from Delaware Township. Thank you.
Paige, Steve is here. Benedetta is not here yet.
Okay. Okay. I see Benedetta on the. Does she need to be unmuted? No? Yes. Do we? Okay. Are we waiting for Miss Lambert still? Just one moment, folks. I'm just waiting to see for Benedetta Lambert to come into the room. I know Mr. Stegman is in the room.
Paige, you have her.
I do have her. Okay. Okay. I'm sorry.
Go
I've been
ahead.
waiting for somebody to tell me. Sorry.
Yep,
Okay.
yep.
So these questions are for Mr. Stegman and Ms. Lambert. If you'd like to do your opening statement, you have 3 minutes.
Hang on. I probably need to unmute them too. Hold on.
I was going to say, I see them muted.
Yeah, as soon as you come back into the main room, you're muted.
Yeah. So unmute. That's why I was wondering.
Yeah, my fault.
Okay, try again.
No, I've got Benedetta unmuted.
Ah, there she
You
is.
can hear me, right?
Now,
I can hear you now.
Okay.
and I'm about to unmute Steve.
Okay.
And now you've got Steve unmuted.
All right, super. Okay, so we'll try again. This is for Mr. Stegman and Ms. Lambert. You have 3 minutes to present your opening statement.
Steve, why don't you start?
Sure. Well, as many of you, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. It's great to be on a call or a Zoom meeting, so it could be a flow of information back and forth. But as many of you know me, I started in Lambertville in 1988 when I opened my first store. I got involved with the Chamber of Commerce, with my business in town, and got involved with a great group of people who are still my friends from the first year I came here. And got involved with the Chamber, the Shad Festival. You may know I ran the Shad Festival for 17 years. Moved on into my store, ran my larger store. Always been involved with city issues. I was appointed to my first term in 2002, perhaps. And before that, I served on the planning board, the zoning board, a multitude of committees, including the parking committee, the beautification committee. I was involved with the biped safety grant and getting that little mini park where the Christmas tree is now. Decorative lighting throughout the central business district, historic looking poles and meter hangers for the city. And I could talk about the last 17 years in office, but I don't want to take all the time. But it's great to be able to speak to you, to be back, to be running for a position on city council. And I appreciate the opportunity to answer your questions.
Okay.
You have a little over a minute, Benedetta.
Okay. So I've been living in Lambertville for 35 years with my husband and my son. We live up in Cottage Hill. We've been up here the whole time. I recently retired a few years ago from a large Fortune 500 healthcare corporation. And what I bring to the candidacy is a long career of experience, primarily as an IT professional, but really kind of, I guess, or minoring, if that's a word we can use, in financial applications, financial systems. Throughout my career, I've worked in banking and healthcare and supported very large enterprise-wide financial systems like general ledger, capital project management, supply chain finance. I spent a good deal of my career supporting purchasing, accounts payable, accounts receivable.
Okay, so this is a question for Mr. Stegman. It says, the question is, you previously served on the city council for 17 years. Can you explain how the budget crisis arose? What did you do at the time to prevent it? 2 minutes.
Thank you. Well, I wasn't really, first I don't know if it's proper to call it a budget crisis. I would say that the city had assembled debt to get projects done. There was never a crisis mode in council during that time. There were some concerns about the size of the debt, but we were always assured that it would be able to be dealt with on a positive and financial basis. So when one would sit and read all the audits that were done, which we had available to us every year at the end of the year for the previous year, the bond rating we had, there were no real red flags that I was aware of at the time. And I don't think there are a whole lot of red flags now, but we do have a very large debt that we have to plan on paying, continue to pay back. We've been paying it back for several years.
Okay. Okay, then I guess we'll move on to the next question. This is with regard to the city facilities. And this is for both Mr. Stegman and Ms. Lambert. It says, per the budget discussions, the city seems to be considering either selling some of the city facilities or undertaking renovations to improve the conditions of these facilities. Can you talk about the pros and cons to each approach and how you'll get to take into consideration opinions from the public? 2 minutes.
I'll take, just clue me at 1 minute so I don't talk to.
Timeout.
There's something going on up in the secret square up there. Is it okay to start?
I don't know what.
I'm not sure. But if you can all hear me, I'll continue.
1 moment, Mr. Stegman, I apologize.
We are still struggling with breakout rooms. So if the 2 people who have invitations to join breakout rooms could do that, that would be great.
My apologies.
That's okay.
Shall I read the question again?
No, go ahead. Yes, that would be good.
Okay, I'll read the question again. So this is with regard to the city facilities. It says, per the budget discussions, the city seems to be considering either selling some of the city facilities or undertaking renovations to improve the conditions of these facilities.
Okay.
Can you talk about the pros and cons to each approach and how you'll get and take into consideration opinions from the public? 2 minutes.
Yes, well, first I think that an assessment has to be done to these buildings from an outside party with real numbers and real problems. That way the city can get to know exactly what needs to be done to address any current problems there are in the building. Now, going forward, we have to do an assessment of the future needs of the building. And if the future needs of the buildings, what to do with those questions, we can address them separately. But I'm saying unequivocally now that I will not vote to sell any of the city, the Acme, City Hall, or the library. So that's my stance on it. I would like to be involved with the process to go through what's needs to be done with the buildings. I have been in and out of those buildings for 17 years, and along the way, we've made major repairs to them. Are they new? No. Are they old? Yes. Are they cherished by most of the people that live in the city? Absolutely. So that's my position on that. I'll take more questions about it later if you'd like, but I'll give some time to Benedetta.
Okay.
Thank you. I think that it's really important for our community to retain our historic city buildings and try to do whatever we can within reason to bring them to a state where they can meet current and reasonably foreseeable future needs. My concern with kind of selling the buildings and starting a large scale city municipal complex is that we're such a small community, we're a close-knit community, and it seems like a large, out of proportion undertaking. The nice thing about looking at the city, at the existing structures, is you can parcel out the work, or you can develop phases to do the work, and you don't have to necessarily, you can do that over a period of time, which would minimize the disruption and hopefully minimize the disruption to the community, which I think is important. But ultimately, I think I'd like to see our community stay within the historic structures that we currently have and look for ways to improve them, as I said, within reason. But until you do an assessment, you really don't know how big an undertaking that is. And I would hate to see us throw away our heritage without really doing that due diligence.
Okay. I apologize. It seems I skipped one of my questions, so I'm going to go back to this one question, if that's okay. And this is in reference to the budget crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And this is directed to both of you. Mm-hmm. Explain your understanding of the city's current financial crisis. What ideas are you bringing to the governing body to fix it and keep Lambertville affordable? 2 minutes.
I'll start. I think the approach is a common sense budget approach, and also an approach that takes into consideration that we are going through the most difficult time in this country that we have ever been through with the pandemic. And I think everybody's got to take a little step back and slow down and make sure it's a common sense budget. Over the past 2 years, there's been almost a $1 million raise in spending on in the city budget. I think although the budget was just passed, I think we have to take a really hard look about how we are protecting ourselves for the future and taking care of our current obligations. And I can't stress hard enough how there are several unsure things coming up. We don't know if we're going to be getting the same amount of funding for municipal funding from the state. Next year, we don't even know how much, if the school support is going to be given, and the taxpayers will have to make up with that. So
1 minute.
I would just like to slow it down.
I agree with Steve on that. We're really in perfect alignment with that. When I looked at, or when I first got involved, I asked about the past crisis. And without really dwelling on that, we had a really good bond rating. We had clean audits. So not really sure what the crisis was, and maybe I'll have an opportunity to learn that going forward. But I agree with Steve. We need to find ways to spend on things that are critical to the public health crisis, critical to the economic situation, and helpful to our small business owners without doing a lot of unnecessary spending. And the questions we should be asking are, do we really need this? Why? What happens if we don't spend it now? Can we spend it later? And what's the plan?
Okay. Okay. Moving on to the next topic, growth, development, and redevelopment. And this is for both of you. How would you balance Lambertville's need for growth and revenue with maintaining its historic feel? 2 minutes.
So, Ben, do you want to go first? Because I've gone first. I'll let you
So,
I've
sure.
been taking so much of your time. I'm so
No,
sorry.
that's okay. You know, I think that development is fine. What I'd like to see for Lambertville is development within existing structures and kind of trying to retain the original look and feel as much as possible. I am opposed to providing incentives to developers to come in and build high density types of structures. I think that's kind of a penny wise, pound foolish. Our community relies on tourism, and they come here for our charm, our architecture, the quaintness, and the historical feel and the character. And I think we need to really look at ways to develop within as many structures as we have. As
1 minute.
Okay, go ahead, Steve.
Thank you. You know, I would like to find out if everything that is planning on being built out by development, and the development has changed so much because there's now a different plan for the YMAC, and it's a different, and now we have to address the fair share. I would like to get an idea of, if we built out the way we're planning on building out, what would the city's take be of the tax base? Because no one has really, they've talked about we need to build to bring in more ratables. We are building. The end of Church Street has 3 or 4 townhouses going up. We are building. The YMAC has been approved to be developed for 9 lots.
Time.
I would like to get that assessment from someone in the city to see how much we're going to be able to get from these projects.
Okay. Okay. The next question, also with regard to growth, development, and redevelopment, is please explain how your campaign defines overdevelopment. 1 minute.
Overdevelopment to me means high density, tall structures that really, I guess, detract from our community's current pace and character. I also think that it's a mistake to try to give too many incentives to developers. I think that we should welcome them. We should welcome some development. But we also need to think about things like parking and impact to existing residents.
Okay. Do you have anything to add to that, Mr. Stegman?
Yeah, yes, I do.
15 seconds.
Thank you so much. What was attempted to do in the city on Delavan Street, I consider that gross overdevelopment. What was proposed to do currently on the police precinct, I think that is gross overdevelopment.
Okay. All right. The next group of questions with regard to civil rights. How do you feel about police accountability? What police reforms would you advocate? For example, body cameras or a review board for civilian complaints. 1 minute.
So I think that all police activity should be looked at regardless of where you're living, because there's always opportunity for improvement, for reform. Obviously, we would, I support the use of body cameras, mandatory use of them, and also to hopefully eliminate things like chokeholds.
Okay.
And the outreach that the police department has done to
30 seconds.
In the past with the Hispanic community was handled so kindly and so wonderfully, and there was a lot of, and there still is a lot of outreach. So I think we're a little bit ahead of the curve on some of these conversations that have been going around nationally. So we're on a good path.
Okay. Okay, and what, if any, systemic changes would you make to combat racism? 1 minute.
I think you have to look at the situation in well, if you're talking about Lambertville, I think you just have to look at situations that have arisen in the last 3 or 4 years about perceived problems or perceived plus good things that have been done to do that. We're a very unique community here. We're isolated. We don't have the same challenges as some other cities have, but there's always reasons to do outreach. There's always reasons to do community policing. There's always
30 seconds.
reasons to bring people together to discuss these problems.
And I think that having listened to some of the conversations over the last week about police reform, introducing more services to help people of color and people of lower income so that they have access to mental health services, to health services, and employment support.
Okay. Okay. All right, so we'll move on to closing. This is addressed to you, Mr. Stegman.
Mm-hmm.
Given that you previously resigned from the city council, why do you want to be reelected now?
Well, that's a very good question, and it's a question I get asked a lot. I was really okay taking a back seat for a couple of years. And what brought me back was the community development fair, when I saw projects, the scope of which I had never seen proposed for Lambertville before. And I was very concerned that our historic buildings and the historic nature of what we do in Lambertville was at risk. So that is why I got back. I think I can be a bridge to in between the two factions. There's a lot of polarization in the city. I haven't seen polarization like this in the past, and I think it's time to work to the future and involve as many people with different views as we can, and put down the swords and get to work.
Okay. All right, and this is for both. What do you see as the single most pressing issue that the council will need to address in 2021? 2 minutes.
Go ahead, Steve.
It's not going to be an easy year.
No, it's not.
We have a lot, the business community, God bless them, because they are going to have a long road back.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to have to do things for the business community to really give them a boost. That is a huge challenge in this city, known as a destination. If we don't move forward progressively together, working with the business community, and I believe that started, which is a great move, then we are going to really suffer because of it.
I would agree. I think the biggest issue we're going to have into 2021 is economic. We have people out of work. We have businesses that are suffering. And those are all going to blow back into some of the things we're talking about now, particularly with our budget.
1 minute.
So we do have to find ways to revitalize our economy. We have to find ways to not overtax our citizens, especially those that are out of work. And hopefully do that with while adding value to the community, because people who work add value to the community.
Okay. All right, and final question for both of you. There are residents who have found this primary divisive. Regardless of whether you agree and regardless of whether you win, what will you commit to doing to ensure a civil and respectful culture going forward? 2 minutes.
I look forward to it. I think it's a great way to get things done. The uncivilness, if you call it that, and I've seen it. You know, I've seen it at meetings from both sides. People are frustrated. People are frustrated. They are not being heard. It is the issue that I hear more than other issues. So I think that everyone is welcome to their opinion, and we should encourage a community involvement in everything that we do, or else we are going to get nowhere. But let me say this: if we don't put a handle on how much taxes the people in this city are going to be paying, then none of what we're doing now really matters, because it is going to be a very expensive place to live. And I'm concerned about our seniors. I think there should be a freeze on any spending going forward, and even going backward to what's been done for the last 2 years.
1 minute.
And I think we really have to look hard at that and plan the big moves, the big spending a couple of years down the road when we're back on our feet. Now, I just can't see proceeding at the race we're going through to spend money on projects that mostly don't need to be done.
There is divisiveness. You can feel it. You can almost cut it with a knife. I have always operated under the principle that it's really about the task at hand, the business that needs to be done. So it would be about the business of the city of Lambertville. And regardless of whatever personal feelings or animosities I might have had toward an individual, you really have to put those aside. You have to work toward successful completion of the task at hand. And I would hope that I could hopefully set an example.
Okay, thank you very much for your time this evening.
Hey, thank you, Steve, Benedetta, and Paige. And now, just bear with us.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak with everybody. It's very appreciated.
Thank you, Steve. And now just bear with us while we shift candidates in and out. And our next, on our final slate, it will be Beth Acero and Maddie Urbish. And let me know when we see them in the room. And I will be posing the questions. And my name is Deb Klein, and I live up the river in Delaware Township. Do we have?
Yeah, I'm struggling here. Give me a minute.
Okay.
All right, you are good, Deb.
All righty. Thank you, Elaine. Okay. So opening statements, 3 minutes. You can divide that up between the two of you, and we will keep time. So we're already at the point of running over, and thank you for staying with us. Beth and Maddie, do you want to give us your opening statements?
Absolutely. I don't see Maddie, but I'm sure she's on.
I can see you.
All right, wonderful. Thank you. I need my partner. So thank you, Indivisible First, for providing this forum to us. Maddie and I really appreciate the opportunity to come talk to you tonight. My name is Beth Acero. I live on Delaware Avenue in Lambertville. I've been here about 23 years. Married to Joanne Shaley. We have a daughter who's 20. We've been together 34 years and married for 7. Our daughter went through the South Hunterdon school system, wonderful nurturing system that it is. And we actually moved here in advance of adopting her so that she could be raised in this great town. Some ask me, why do I serve? We've been asked that. So I really come from a community service driven family. I grew up in nearby Hopewell. My father was a borough councilman, a fireman, EMT. My mom was a Meals on Wheels leader and a Young Democrat leader.
1 minute.
And I started out my volunteer service to the city with a few positions on the LPS PTA, and then a few years on the LPS Board of Ed. Then I came to the council in '08. And I'm currently serving on the planning board, and it's my second year as council president. And I founded the Human Rights Council here in Lambertville. And this year, and starting into next year, my focus will be on economic and business development, which started before COVID. I'm running for re-election because I deeply am committed to staying and doing the hard work to bring the budget back on track and focus on long-term stability and planning for the city.
Thank you. Maddie?
Just to echo Beth, thank you all. Really appreciate this opportunity. So I am Maddie Urbish. I live on Perry Street with my husband, our 6-month-old son, and 2 rescue dogs. We moved to town in 2017. In terms of my background, I have 10 years of experience in public service in the nonprofit and government sectors. I also served on the zoning and planning board here in town prior to council, and I also served on the planning board up in Stockton Borough when we lived there, and on the board of the Delaware River Greenway Partnership. Most recently, I served as Governor Murphy's policy advisor on energy and environment, where I had the chance to work on some really exciting initiatives with the Clean Energy Act, offshore wind, stormwater regulations, and probably most notably for this community here, fighting against the Pence pipeline. I'm running to stay on council because I believe in government as a positive force. I want to tackle important issues in our community, like fixing our financial problems, actually making some progress on flooding, and just ensuring that Lambertville continues to be the thriving and welcoming community for all that I fell in love with.
Thank you, Maddie. Since we have you at the podium right now, would you please explain your understanding of the city's current financial crisis and what ideas are you bringing to the governing body to fix it and keep Lambertville affordable? You have 2 minutes.
Sure. So I think we have a couple of challenges with our budget. One is the extreme amount of debt that the city has on its books, and specifically the approach of using debt to pay down debt. It's a very expensive way to pay for projects. So one thing that we need to do is significantly reduce that. And I feel really good about the budget that the council we passed this week, because it really cuts down on new debt by 97%. The other thing that we need to do is really focus on ways to find savings and cut costs and efficiencies where there are places to find them, but also figure out ways to widen our tax base and spread out the burden so that it's not just current taxpayers shouldering basically the bills that are due because of really unplanned and sort of irresponsible borrowing for so many years. But I know Beth has been working on this for a while.
1 minute.
I want to give her a chance.
Yeah, so I think the biggest issue we have right now is that debt. And there really is not an option to do nothing. If we don't do something like expand the tax base and continue with our efficiency cuts, taxes will go up $500 a year for the next 6 years, starting in a year or two. And that's just not acceptable to us. And we need to continue to push to find ways to expand the tax base with smart development and keep the efficiencies coming that our business administrator has been very aptly working on.
Thank you. The next question is still about the budget, and this goes to Beth. You have served on the city council for 7 or 8 years. Can you explain how the budget crisis arose and what you did at the time to prevent it? You have 2 minutes.
Yes, certainly. So as you can imagine, when the new mayor came in and the business administrator came in and this budget and debt problem was uncovered, it was something that I had not fully understood as a member of council. And when I went back to kind of look at where we had been, it was very clear to me that the budget was cut very close to the vest by our previous mayor. He was not one that could be easily challenged or questioned. And when I see how our mayor deals with our professionals versus the way that our previous mayor did, the previous mayor told the professionals what was going to be done, and they were to do it. There was no long-term planning. There was no capital planning. It's night and day the way we used to run the city and the way we run it now. It's very clear to me that the professionals that we have now will get us, are getting us on the right track. But we did not have those professionals, trusted professionals. We did not.
1 minute.
We did not take the information that they gave us, and also too know that there were no red flags thrown by either our CFO or the bond attorney or the audit. The audits turned out to be very rudimentary as we ended up looking at them now. So I chose to stick around. I'm proud to be an active part of the transparent sausage making, if you will, now. And we're in a much better place now in this whole transparent environment. And it was completely opaque before. The budget was given to us. We were not consulted. So I'm proud to be in this new administration where that's no longer the case.
Okay, thank you. The next question is on city facilities. Per budget discussions, the city seems to be considering either selling some of the city facilities or undertaking renovations to improve the conditions of the facilities. Can you talk about the pros and cons of each approach and how you'll get and take into consideration opinions from the public? You have 2 minutes.
I can start here. So the city is spending the rest of this year really studying this issue in depth. We had an initial walkthrough by our architect and had feedback from the different department heads that are working in the facilities to provide us with sort of an initial back of the envelope list of what needed to be done and what it could potentially cost. However, we need to do a more thorough study to really understand what our options are. And so from my perspective, and I know Beth and I have talked about this a lot, we're really eager to see the information and to get a clear view of what those options are. If it makes sense to not just bring up to code, but really provide upgrades for our existing facilities to make them not only a great place to work, but a great place for the community to use. So I'm really excited about seeing that information, and I'm excited about the official start of the community advisory team and the role that they're going to play. So Beth, I don't know if you wanted to talk a little bit about the community advisory team and their role.
Absolutely. So they were actually announced earlier this week. 20 folks. We had 50 folks come in on applications. 20 folks with very varied experiences were named: historians, planners, land use experts, both renters and homeowners, old and young alike, people that have been here a short time and a long time. And really their job is to spearhead the discussion of next moves and ask for studies to be done based on options that they'd like to see and discuss, and then bring those ideas out to the community. Somewhat like we tried to do, quite frankly, at the beginning with the community development fair, but at a much more grassroots level. So a lot more information can be disseminated a lot easier and quicker with, and they'll go, since there's 20 of them, they'll be able to fan out to their neighbors and groups of affinity that they have. So the community advisory team really is our key to the next step of understanding various options. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question is on growth development and redevelopment. How would you balance Lambertville's need for growth and revenue with maintaining its historic feel? You have 2 minutes.
Well, none of our historic buildings, whether we keep them or whether we sell them, whatever the community advisory team recommends, and make sure that it's something that the town can afford. But there would never be a time where we would take an existing historic building and do any harm to it. If we were to sell City Hall, for example, the historic nature of that building would be retained in the sale. So whether the city owns it or someone else owns it, that will be retained. Maddie,
yeah, I would love to jump in. We have a really strong historic commission in this town, and I think that they're going to play a really key role along with the CAT, and we have members on the, I'm sorry, I hate acronyms, the community advisory team. We have members on there from the historic commission as well as the environmental commission, and the various boards and volunteer groups in the city to really help us think through
1 minute.
That's fine. What is appropriate for Lambertville? What makes sense, both to honor the history and the character of the town, but also thinking forward and what our needs are going to be in the future. The library is such a wonderful building, and we want to make sure that the services provided through the library that are so critical to our community continue to be there and improve. And, this is a town built on volunteers. We need more meeting space. Folks shouldn't have to do it in their homes if we can provide really good meeting space. So there are all of these different components that are important and complex that we need to be working through. And that's why having an organized, community-driven conversation is so important to this piece.
Thank you. In your opinion, when would new development in Lambertville become overdevelopment? You have 1 minute.
That's a great question. I think a lot of that is driven by the community. And Beth and I have talked about this before. There are things that are going to fit well with the aesthetic and the space. And there are some things that won't. And at the end of the day, that may be a conversation that has to be had over a period of time based on the information we have. And I know the conversations that Beth and I have had about this are also about the budget. So Beth, I wanted to give you an opportunity to jump in as well.
Yeah, so it's also going to be driven by the budget. Quite frankly, we're going to have to keep our spending, as efficient as possible. So I don't think our spending could warrant any overdevelopment, quite frankly.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Moving on, next question is on civil rights. How do you feel about police accountability? What police reforms would you advocate in, for example, body cameras or a review board for civilian complaints? You have 1 minute.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'll go first. So this is something that is very near and dear to my heart based on previous work experience in the city of Trenton. I fully support body cameras. I know that Governor Murphy has sort of ordered that working with the Attorney General, is working to get all police departments equipped with body cameras. I believe that our police can and should play an important role in the community. And so I'm very interested in having those conversations. Beth, I want to give you a chance too.
Yeah, so on the Human Rights Council, Lieutenant Brown sits on that council, and we've also held a few immigrant rights sessions with in cooperation with Fisherman's Mark. So I believe also having that tie into our Human Rights Board is very important with the police and to keep that relationship.
Thank you. And what, if any, systemic changes would you make to combat racism? 1 minute.
I think housing is a big piece of this, and that's why we have an affordable housing mandate in this state, is because of historic racial segregation and policies that force racial segregation. And one of the main ways that we can work to dismantle that is to provide housing for folks and access to education.
And another piece would be attracting African-American business owners to Lambertville. And actively doing
30
so.
seconds.
That's something we're looking at as part of our business roundtables and some work that we're doing to bring in African-American business owners and to integrate more downtown.
Okay, thank you. And in closing, what do you see as the single most pressing issue that the council will need to address in 2021? You have 2 minutes.
I think without a doubt, it's the budget, but that's going to be driven by a few components. One is early next year, the community advisory team is going to bring us the recommendation. And as long as it's affordable and it's something that has been, approved by the community, that's something we'll probably go ahead with. But that then folds into the budget. So our 2021 budget will have to include an understanding of what that community advisory team has advised, right? So it's all about the budget next year, and it's all about how to tackle the debt. And we don't want to raise taxes. We want to widen the tax base and continue our cuts in efficiencies, especially that our business administrator has brought in. But Maddie, I'll let you finish up.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with Beth. I mean, the budget remains a major challenge that we need to face and that we're continuing to face head on. As I mentioned at the beginning, this town has a flooding issue and has for a very long time, and we really need to start making progress on that. I hope to be working with our business administrator and others in town to develop sort of an outreach and community focused plan similar to this community advisory team, but focused on flooding. And also, you know, I think that we will be tackling the issue of racial injustice and trying to break down the structures in our society for the next several years, and I hope it remains high on the priority list.
And we want to make sure that the council is a positive force, and the voices that we have and the leadership we have continue a very positive leadership voice in the city. We want to make sure that that's part of what we do going forward.
Okay. And finally, there are residents who have found this primary divisive. Regardless of whether you agree and regardless of whether you win, what will you commit to doing to ensure a civil and respectful culture going forward? You have 2 minutes.
Well, making safe spaces, you know, to discuss issues, and doing a better job of making information accessible and easily digestible, and making sure people, you know, are heard and valued. Just leading by example. Just what we've seen, quite frankly, going on in the last few months here in town. There's so much going on already with COVID, and on our national level. We wanted to drive a very positive campaign with answers, and we want to continue to do that.
Yeah, I agree with Beth. You know, I think that there is a lot of leading by example that needs to be done, both from city officials and volunteers, but the community as well. Creating a safe space where we can disagree and do so in a respectful and civil way is so important. And I think what Lambertville is really about. And, you know, just making sure that we are listening and really hearing people and taking into account the information that they're providing and making sure that they feel heard. Because I think a lot of times discourse can start to go negative when people are feeling like they aren't heard or valued. And so it is our responsibility as members of City Council to make sure that members of this community feel heard and valued and a part of the conversation.
And Maddie and I will continue to be very responsive to community input.
Thank you very much, Maddie and Beth. And thanks to all our candidates that I hope and trust that you all of our attendees found this a good use of your time, and that you're a little bit more grounded in your understanding of the positions of the candidate. There's just a reminder that the vote by mail ballots have been set out, and you should have received yours by now. If you did not and you want to vote by mail, please check with County Clerk Mary Melfi. I believe somebody's going to try to put that in the chat, how you can access, get in touch with Mary. No voter who has been issued a vote by mail ballot will be permitted to vote on a machine in any election, but you can cast a provisional ballot that will be reviewed later. The Board of Elections accepts in-person delivery of ballots until the close of polls on election day at 8 p.m. And they will also accept ballots received by mail with a timely postmark after the close of polls. By next week, I believe Monday next week, there'll be a drop box in front of the Pittori Justice Center for if you'd like to leave your ballot there. And you can still register to vote in the primary until next Tuesday, June 16th. So if you know somebody who has not registered, please urge them to do so. And again, it's the county clerk, so they would be in touch with the county clerk's office. Once again, many thanks to all you attendees, to the candidates, to our moderators, and to the intrepid Elaine Plesham for dealing with all our technical issues behind the scenes.
Yeah, we made it harder than it needed to be, so thank you again for your patience with that.
And you know, please check out the candidates. I'm sure you'll hear more from them. And if you'd like to learn more about Indivisible Lambertville-New, please go to our website, indivisiblelnh.com. We urge you to come to our meetings. We have meetings once a month, and we do try to be as active in the community as we can. So thank you all very much. Have a great evening.